Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and for this particular lesson, we're going to be solving an equation. All right. Now let's take a look at it. Let's read what we got. This equation says that don't forget that negative sign, negative x equals 40. Negative x equals 40. So somebody might mistakenly look at this and think, well, I don't got to do no work. We already know what x is. Wrong. We don't know what x is. We know what negative x is equal to, but we don't know what x is equal to. And when we're solving an equation, we're solving for the variable, meaning the positive value of the variable. We don't care what negative x is equal to. We want to know what x is equal to. All right. So the way to solve for x is to isolate x by itself on the left side of the equation. So the question is, how do I get rid of this negative sign? How do I get rid of that negative sign? You first want to think about the fact that, in case you don't already notice, the fact that that negative sign represents a -1. I'm going to say that again. That negative sign is the same thing as a -1. The negative sign is the same thing as a -1. So check this out. I'm going to just write it just to make things more clear. The negative sign is the same thing as a -1. So negative x is the same thing as -1x. All right. So now in order to get x by itself, we need to get rid of this -1. If it was a +1, it wouldn't matter, because +1, well, 1x is the same thing as x, but negative x is not the same thing as x. In fact, they're exact opposites. That's why we need to get rid of this -1 in order to solve for x. So we want to get rid of -1. Cool. Question is, how do you do it? You do the opposite operation. Okay. Well, what is -1 doing in this expression right here? -1 is being multiplied by x. -1x means -1 times x. So in order to get rid of -1, we got to do the opposite of multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide by -1. So right here under -1x, I'm going to set it up and make it look like a fraction to show my division. So we got -1. Now, this is an equation. Whenever we solve an equations, in order to keep the equation balanced, you must do the same thing on each side of the equation. So just now, I divided by -1. If I do that on the left side, I got to also do it on the right side. Because if I don't, then the equation is not going to be balanced. And mathematics and algebra specifically is all about balance. Everything got to be balanced. Just like Mayat from ancient Kemet, right? So if I divide by -1 on the left side, I also divide by -1 on the right side. So this 40 gets divided by -1. All right. Now, what's -1 divided by -1? That equals +1, because the negative divided by negative always equals a positive. And you divide a number by itself, or by the same number. So it's going to give you +1, right? +1x is the same thing as just x. So that's how you get x by itself, by dividing by -1. Now on the right-hand side, you do 40 divided by -1. Any number divided by 1 is that original number. So it would be 40, but because we're dividing a +40 by -1, we got to apply the rules for multiplication when we're dealing with positives and negatives. When the signs are different, actually not the rules for multiplication, technically the rules for division, even though they got the same rules as each other. But when you divide a positive by a negative, your quotient is always going to be negative. So this is going to become -40. All right, so x equals -40. Now let's check that to make sure. Let's check that to make sure. Let's look at this. So I'm going to put my check mark to indicate that this is me checking it. The original problem said -x is equal to 40, right? Okay, so I'm going to write that. Negative, because there was a negative sign in front of the x. There was a negative sign in front of the x. And then I'm saying x is equal to -40. So I already got a negative sign there, but then I'm going to put a -40 next to that. And I'm going to put the -40 in parentheses. And then I'm going to put the equal sign. I don't like that equal sign. Then I'm going to put this 40. And my question is this left side, is the expression on the left side equal to the expression on the right side? This is a +40, but I see two negative signs over here. But what happens when you have two negatives? That's called a double negative, a double negative. Double negatives become positive. Double negatives become positive. In mathematics, two wrongs, wrong meaning negative, two wrongs do make a right, or a positive. So this becomes 40. And we already have 40 over here. So that's 40 over 40, which is proof that x does equal negative 40. So you should always get into the habit of, or you should get into the habit of always checking your solutions. So if you think that x equals negative 40 is the solution, cool. Prove it. Prove it by checking your work. Go back to the original equation, take your solution and substitute in for the variable, and then see what happens. See if it gives you a true statement. See if it gives you that. Okay? Now, I just showed you how to do it. Now it's time for you to go practice. Go practice doing a bunch of problems on your own. You can use this video as a guide. All right? And I'll catch up to you in the next video. Peace.